At exactly 2:13 in the morning, Rebecca Lawson sat alone inside her parked car outside St. Vincent Medical Center staring through rain so heavy it blurred the entire parking lot into distorted lights and shadows. Her mascara had already started running long before the first message arrived. For nearly an hour, she had been sitting there unable to drive home, unable to walk inside the hospital, unable to stop thinking about the anniversary date glowing at the corner of her dashboard clock. 18 years. 18 years since the night a little boy vanished beside Blackwater Bridge and changed the course of her life forever. Most people in the city no longer talked openly about the case anymore. Time buried it beneath newer tragedies, newer headlines, newer scandals. But Rebecca never escaped it. Not really. Some nights, she still woke up hearing rain against windows and immediately felt that same panic tightening inside her chest before she even opened her eyes. Some guilt does not fade with time. It simply learns how to sit quietly inside people until something forces it awake again. Then suddenly, without warning, her phone vibrated against the steering wheel. At first, Rebecca ignored it because anonymous messages had become part of her life ever since the disappearance became national news back in 2008. Strangers online accused her of murder for years afterward. Talk shows analyzed her interviews frame by frame, searching for evidence of hidden guilt. Parents wrote hateful letters blaming her for failing a child who trusted her completely. Rebecca learned long ago that opening unknown messages usually only reopened wounds she spent years trying desperately to survive. But something about this notification felt different immediately. The number contained no caller information at all, just a blank screen and a single sentence waiting beneath it. "You made the wrong choice that night." Rebecca froze instantly, not because the accusation itself shocked her anymore, but because of the wording. Choice. Most people believe Tyler Bennett's disappearance was either a terrible accident or a deliberate crime. Almost nobody framed it as a decision. Yet Rebecca understood immediately what the message implied because deep down she spent 18 years asking herself the exact same question in private. What if she had chosen differently during those few terrible seconds beside the bridge? Then another notification appeared before she could even breathe properly again. This time it was a photograph. Old, slightly blurry, taken sometime during the summer of 2008. Rebecca recognized it instantly because she remembered the exact day it was taken at Riverside Park during Tyler's 8th birthday picnic. In the picture, Tyler Bennett stood smiling beside her while holding a melting ice cream cone and wearing the oversized red hoodie he refused to take off for almost an entire year. Rebecca's hands started shaking violently staring at the image because Tyler disappeared less than 12 hours after that photograph was taken. Police searched for him across 3 counties. Divers spent days dragging the river beneath Blackwater Bridge. Helicopters scanned forests surrounding the highway while television stations interrupted normal broadcasts for emergency updates about the missing child. But they never found Tyler Bennett. No body, no confirmed sightings. Nothing except scattered evidence and unanswered questions strong enough to destroy multiple lives permanently. Then Rebecca noticed something even worse about the photograph. Someone had circled Tyler's face in black marker. Beneath it were 4 words typed carefully across the bottom corner. "He trusted you completely." For years, Rebecca Lawson publicly insisted the disappearance was a tragic accident caused by a frightened child running into a storm after an emotional argument. That became the official version repeated endlessly across interviews, documentaries, and courtroom discussions afterward. But official stories rarely capture the full emotional truth surrounding moments that change lives forever. Because long before Tyler Bennett vanished near Blackwater Bridge, Rebecca already felt her entire world collapsing around her piece by piece. In 2008, she was not the wealthy real estate executive people knew today. She was a financially exhausted single mother drowning beneath debt, foreclosure notices, and impossible responsibilities she never truly wanted but could not escape either. Tyler entered her life unexpectedly after his father Marcus Bennett disappeared during another drug binge, and Child Protective Services temporarily placed the boy with Rebecca because she was the closest stable relative available. Stable. That word haunted Rebecca later because stability was exactly what she lacked privately during that period. She worked double shifts, barely slept, hid unpaid bills inside kitchen drawers, smiled through conversations while panic consumed her internally almost every hour of every day. Tyler loved her deeply despite all of it, and maybe that was part of what made the guilt unbearable afterward. Then came Daniel Pierce. Charming, ambitious, the kind of man who made Rebecca feel seen during a period when survival consumed every piece of her identity. Daniel convinced Rebecca she deserved a fresh start free from endless sacrifice and family chaos. At first, his influence seemed harmless, encouraging even. He talked about leaving the city together, starting over somewhere warmer, building a life focused on their future instead of constantly cleaning up everyone else's disasters. But over time, Daniel's frustrations toward Tyler became harder to ignore. He never acted openly cruel toward the boy. Instead, it was smaller comments slipping through during tense moments. "You can't save everyone. Marcus is using you. That kid isn't your responsibility forever." Rebecca defended Tyler every time while secretly fearing Daniel might still be right. Because exhaustion changes people slowly. It turns ordinary stress into resentment before someone even realizes it's happening. And on the night Tyler disappeared, everything inside Rebecca finally reached a breaking point she would spend the next 18 years reliving endlessly. Fast flashes of that night still haunted Rebecca in fragments more than full memories. Police divers lowering themselves into freezing black water beneath the bridge while television crews crowded nearby roads. Tyler's abandoned bicycle discovered against wet guardrails hours later. Missing person posters covering storefront windows across the city for months afterward. Rebecca collapsing during an emotional local news interview begging for Tyler to come home safely. Internet forums dissecting every inconsistency inside her statements afterward. A courtroom sketch years later when investigators reopened the case after discovering deleted surveillance footage from traffic cameras near the bridge. And through all of it, one sentence repeated constantly inside Rebecca's mind louder than every accusation coming from strangers around her. "I didn't know what else to do." Because the horrifying truth about life-changing decisions is that they rarely feel monumental while they're happening. Sometimes they last only seconds. A sentence spoken in frustration. A hesitation during panic. A moment where exhaustion wins over compassion just long enough to alter multiple futures forever. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because the story of Rebecca Lawson and Tyler Bennett is not simply about a missing child or an unsolved disappearance that haunted an American city for nearly 2 decades. It is about guilt, responsibility, and the terrifying reality that some decisions follow people long after everyone else stops talking about them. By the end of this story, one question will become impossible to escape. How far would you go to protect your own future? By the age of 51, Rebecca Lawson looked like the kind of woman most people instinctively admire from a distance. She lived inside a gated suburban neighborhood outside Denver where every lawn stayed trimmed perfectly and every kitchen seemed designed for magazine covers. Her real estate company managed luxury commercial properties across 3 states, and local business magazines regularly described her as one of the city's most respected self-made executives. She attended charity galas beside her husband Andrew, donated generously to missing children foundations every year, and carried herself with the polished confidence of someone who survived difficult years and finally built the stable future she once dreamed about. To outsiders, Rebecca Lawson represented success earned through persistence. But people who spend years hiding painful truths often become experts at performing normalcy publicly. And beneath Rebecca's carefully controlled appearance lived 18 years of unresolved fear attached to one night nobody around her fully understood. Because despite all the money, reputation, and security surrounding her life now, Rebecca still avoided driving near Blackwater Bridge whenever storms rolled through the city after dark. The anonymous messages arriving after midnight shattered the emotional distance Rebecca spent years building between herself and the Tyler Bennett case. At first, she convinced herself the texts were another cruel attempt from online conspiracy communities obsessed with the disappearance since 2008. But then more evidence started arriving. Private photographs never released publicly. Scans of deleted police reports. Fragments of surveillance footage investigators claimed were too damaged to recover years earlier. Whoever contacted Rebecca possessed intimate knowledge of that night impossible for ordinary internet strangers to access. And perhaps most disturbing of all, the messages never directly accused her of murder. Instead, they focused obsessively on one specific idea. Choice. You made the wrong choice. You still remember those few seconds. He looked at you before he disappeared. Those sentences terrified Rebecca more than outright threats because deep down, she spent nearly 2 decades privately replaying the same moments, wondering whether Tyler Bennett might still be alive if she reacted differently near the bridge that night. The messages felt less like blackmail and more like someone forcing her to relive guilt she already carried every day internally. Soon questions started spreading through Rebecca's life faster than she could contain them quietly. What decision actually destroyed the Lawson family 18 years earlier? Who exactly possessed unreleased evidence connected to Tyler Bennett's disappearance? And perhaps most horrifying of all, what truly happened to the little boy police never found beneath Blackwater Bridge? Rebecca tried maintaining control outwardly the same way she always had. She deleted emails immediately after reading them, cleared browser histories, started locking her office door even inside her own house. But paranoia slowly invaded everything around her because secrets become harder to carry once someone else proves they know pieces of them too. Andrew noticed changes almost immediately. Rebecca stopped sleeping properly. She jumped whenever notifications appeared on her phone unexpectedly. During dinner conversations, she drifted into silence for long stretches, staring toward windows as though expecting someone outside. When Andrew finally asked directly whether something was wrong, Rebecca lied automatically. "Just work stress," she whispered without meeting his eyes. But marriage exposes emotional shifts eventually, no matter how carefully someone hides them. Andrew knew his wife was terrified long before he understood why. Meanwhile, the internet started resurrecting the Tyler Bennett disappearance with renewed obsession after anonymous footage leaked onto true crime forums late one evening. Old news clips from 2008 spread across TikTok and Reddit again, showing emotional interviews with Rebecca during the original investigation. Younger audiences who barely remembered the case became fascinated by the mystery almost overnight. Some believe Tyler drowned accidentally after running from Rebecca during an emotional argument. Others insisted Rebecca abandoned the child intentionally because caring for him ruined her chances at financial stability and a future with Daniel Pierce. More extreme theories claim Tyler survived, and someone inside law enforcement helped cover up evidence afterward. Rebecca spent entire nights reading discussions she should have avoided because part of her became desperate to know whether strangers somehow pieced together truths she spent years suppressing herself. Thousands of people debated her character without understanding how complicated the reality actually felt from inside those moments. Online, she became either a grieving victim or a manipulative monster. Nobody discussed the possibility that human beings sometimes destroy lives through hesitation, exhaustion, and emotional collapse rather than deliberate cruelty. Then came the surveillance clip. Short, grainy, only 17 seconds long. It appeared anonymously online just after 3 in the morning before spreading across social media faster than Rebecca could react. The footage showed Blackwater Bridge during heavy rain the night Tyler vanished. Headlights illuminated two figures arguing beside the guardrail near the river below. One clearly appeared to be a young Rebecca Lawson. The second figure looked smaller, child-sized. Tyler. Though the audio was corrupted, Rebecca recognized her own body language immediately. Desperate, agitated, exhausted beyond control. At one point, the smaller figure moved suddenly toward the railing, while Rebecca reached forward sharply as though trying to stop him. Then the clip ended abruptly before revealing what happened next. No fall, no disappearance, just static. But those few seconds reignited every suspicion surrounding the case instantly, because for the first time the public saw Rebecca and Tyler together at the bridge the night he vanished. News channels replayed the footage continuously, while internet investigators slowed frames down searching for hidden details. Rebecca watched the clip alone inside her office nearly 20 times before finally closing her laptop with shaking hands. Because unlike everyone else analyzing the footage online, she already knew the terrifying part wasn't what the video showed. It was what happened during the seconds missing afterward. Long before Rebecca Lawson became the polished executive people admired publicly, she was simply a tired 33-year-old woman trying desperately to keep her life from collapsing under pressures she barely knew how to survive. In 2008, Rebecca lived in a small rented duplex outside St. Louis with overdue bills stacked across kitchen counters and foreclosure notices arriving faster than she could hide them from visitors. She worked exhausting hours at a struggling real estate office during the worst financial downturn the country had seen in years, often leaving before sunrise and returning home emotionally drained long after dark. Yet despite everything, Rebecca genuinely tried to be a good mother and caretaker to the people depending on her. Friends from that period remembered her as intelligent, ambitious, and fiercely determined not to fail publicly no matter how chaotic her private life became. She volunteered at school events when possible, packed lunches every morning even after sleeping only a few hours, and constantly reassured everyone around her that things would eventually improve financially. Looking back later, many people admitted Rebecca did not seem cruel or unstable during those years. She seemed exhausted. And sometimes exhaustion changes people slowly enough they do not recognize what it's doing to them until damage already exists. Tyler Bennett entered Rebecca's life permanently during one of the hardest periods she had ever experienced emotionally. Tyler was the 8-year-old son of Rebecca's younger brother Marcus Bennett, a man whose addiction problems and disappearing acts became familiar disasters the family spent years cleaning up repeatedly. After Marcus vanished during another extended drug binge in early 2008, Child Protective Services temporarily placed Tyler with Rebecca because she was the only stable relative still willing to take him in. Stable. That word followed Rebecca constantly during that period despite how fragile her actual situation felt privately. She already struggled raising her own 6-year-old daughter while juggling debt, unstable employment, and increasing pressure from creditors threatening foreclosure on the duplex. Suddenly, she became responsible for another child carrying emotional scars deeper than most adults realized. Tyler barely spoke during his first few weeks living with Rebecca. He flinched at loud arguments, apologized constantly for small mistakes, and slept with hallway lights on every night because he hated darkness after spending so much time alone while Marcus disappeared for days at a time. Rebecca felt overwhelming sympathy for him immediately because beneath his quietness Tyler seemed desperate for stability and affection from anyone willing to provide it consistently. Over time, Tyler grew deeply attached to Rebecca in ways that complicated everything emotionally. He followed her room to room, while she cooked dinner or sorted paperwork late at night. He waited beside windows whenever she worked overtime because he worried she might not come home. Sometimes he called her Mom accidentally before correcting himself quietly afterward with visible embarrassment. Rebecca never scolded him for it because hearing the word triggered equal parts guilt and sadness inside her. She loved Tyler genuinely, but love becomes difficult to sustain cleanly once survival pressure consumes every corner of daily life. Bills continued piling up. Credit card debt exploded. Collection agencies called constantly during dinner. Rebecca started sleeping less than 4 hours most nights while trying unsuccessfully to balance parenting, work, legal paperwork connected to Tyler's guardianship, and endless financial emergencies arriving faster than solutions. By late 2008, emotional exhaustion shaped nearly every interaction inside the house. Rebecca still cared deeply for Tyler, but she also started associating his presence with the collapse of the future she desperately wanted to rebuild for herself and her daughter. Then came Daniel Pierce. Confident, charming, financially successful in ways Rebecca found almost hypnotic during a period where every part of her life felt unstable. Daniel entered the story at exactly the right moment emotionally, because he represented escape more than romance initially. He took Rebecca to expensive restaurants she could not afford alone, talked constantly about opportunity and reinvention, and made her feel seen as something beyond an overwhelmed caretaker drowning beneath responsibilities created by other people's failures. At first, Daniel treated Tyler politely enough, but subtle tensions emerged gradually beneath the surface. He questioned why Rebecca sacrificed so much for a child who technically was not hers. He reminded her Marcus Bennett would eventually drag them all down permanently if boundaries were not established. "You deserve a fresh start, too," Daniel repeated often during late-night conversations while Rebecca cried over unpaid bills and foreclosure threats. The frightening part was that Rebecca slowly started believing him. Not because she stopped loving Tyler, but because desperation changes how people measure morality over time. When survival feels impossible, even compassionate people begin fantasizing quietly about escape. Marcus Bennett only intensified the emotional chaos surrounding everyone involved. Whenever he resurfaced briefly between disappearances, he arrived carrying promises nobody believed anymore. He swore sobriety was finally working, claimed he would reclaim custody of Tyler soon, borrowed money from Rebecca he never repaid. Sometimes he vanished for weeks immediately afterward, leaving Rebecca once again responsible for cleaning up emotional damage Tyler barely understood himself. Tyler adored his father despite everything, which made watching Marcus repeatedly fail him even harder for Rebecca emotionally. More than once she considered pursuing permanent custody because Tyler's instability worsened every time Marcus disappeared again. But legal fees alone felt impossible financially during that period. Rebecca increasingly found herself trapped between compassion and resentment. She loved Tyler deeply enough to sacrifice for him repeatedly, yet part of her also feared she was sacrificing her entire future in the process. That emotional contradiction quietly poisoned her mental state throughout the months leading toward Blackwater Bridge. One evening several weeks before Tyler disappeared, Rebecca sat helping him finish homework at the kitchen table while overdue notices covered half the counter nearby. Tyler remained unusually quiet most of the night before finally asking something so unexpected Rebecca initially thought she misheard him. "Would things be easier if I wasn't here?" The question hit her hard because no 8-year-old should understand emotional burden deeply enough to ask it aloud. Rebecca laughed nervously at first and immediately reassured him everything was fine. She hugged him tightly and promised he was not causing problems. But afterward, she sat alone in the bathroom crying because somewhere inside herself, she recognized the terrifying truth behind Tyler's question. Children notice emotional exhaustion far more than adults realize. Tyler saw the stress in Rebecca's face every morning, heard late-night arguments about money through thin apartment walls, watched Daniel Pierce grow increasingly frustrated whenever conversations centered around Marcus or guardianship issues. And perhaps most heartbreaking of all, Tyler slowly started believing the chaos surrounding Rebecca's life might disappear if he simply stopped being part of it. Years later, Rebecca would replay that conversation endlessly because she never understood at the time how devastating those words would eventually become. By the fall of 2008, Rebecca Lawson's life had become a pressure cooker slowly collapsing from every direction at once. The foreclosure process on her duplex moved faster than she expected after months of missed payments, and collection agencies stopped pretending sympathy during phone calls entirely. Every morning brought another red notice taped to the front door or another voicemail threatening legal action if balances remained unpaid. Rebecca worked longer hours trying desperately to save what remained of her finances, but the housing market crash destroyed commissions across the city and clients backed out of deals constantly. At night, she sat at the kitchen table surrounded by unopened bills while Tyler and her daughter slept in the next room, completely unaware how close they were to losing the house. Even basic groceries started requiring difficult decisions. Gas money competed with prescription costs. Utility payments got delayed repeatedly. Rebecca stopped answering unknown numbers because most calls now came from creditors or people demanding money she simply did not have. Yet despite all the financial chaos, the emotional pressure surrounding Tyler became what truly pushed her toward breaking internally. Tyler Bennett changed noticeably during those final weeks before the disappearance. The quiet sensitivity Rebecca once found heartbreaking slowly turned inward into something darker and more withdrawn. Teachers reported he barely participated in class anymore. He stopped sleeping properly and developed the habit of sitting silently near windows for long stretches watching cars pass outside as though expecting someone to arrive. Sometimes Rebecca caught him listening outside closed doors whenever she argued with Daniel Pierce late at night about money or custody issues. The child understood far more than adults around him realized. And unfortunately, Daniel Pierce made that emotional tension impossible to ignore. His patience with Tyler disappeared almost completely by October. During arguments, he started saying things Rebecca could not stop replaying later. Marcus needs to take responsibility for his own son. You're drowning trying to save everybody. You can't build a future while dragging all this behind you. Rebecca defended Tyler every time, but the emotional exhaustion inside her made those conversations increasingly complicated because part of her feared Daniel was right. Not about Tyler personally, about survival, about how impossible life felt carrying responsibilities that never seemed to end. Then Marcus Bennett returned unexpectedly after disappearing nearly 6 weeks during another drug binge across Missouri. He arrived at Rebecca's duplex late one evening, visibly unstable and demanding Tyler back immediately despite barely maintaining sobriety long enough to care for himself. The argument that followed became one of the worst Rebecca and Marcus ever had. Tyler overheard everything from the hallway while Marcus screamed accusations about Rebecca trying to replace him as a father. Rebecca refused letting Tyler leave with someone clearly under the influence, but Marcus threatened legal action and promised to take back what belongs to him before storming out into the night. Afterward, Tyler barely spoke at all for 2 straight days. Rebecca tried reassuring him that nobody was taking him anywhere, yet even her own voice sounded emotionally exhausted by then. Deep down, she knew the situation could not continue much longer. She was drowning financially. Daniel threatened leaving repeatedly if chaos around Marcus continued. Her daughter started asking why everyone fought constantly. And Tyler watched all of it, believing more and more that he was somehow responsible for destroying the lives of people trying to care for him. The night everything changed began with another storm rolling across the city just after sunset. Heavy rain flooded roads while thunder shook windows hard enough to wake half the neighborhood repeatedly. Earlier that evening, Rebecca received final foreclosure paperwork confirming they had less than 3 weeks before eviction proceedings officially began. Then Daniel arrived unexpectedly, already angry after another argument about money over the phone. He accused Rebecca of sacrificing her future for people who would never stop dragging her down emotionally and financially. Tyler overheard portions of the fight from the hallway again before disappearing quietly into his bedroom. By nearly midnight, Rebecca finally decided driving Tyler across town to stay temporarily with a family friend might calm things down until Marcus' situation stabilized. At least that is what she told herself afterward. The truth felt messy, eh? Rebecca needed space. Silence. One night without pressure crushing her from every direction simultaneously. Tyler climbed quietly into the passenger seat without arguing while rain hammered the windshield hard enough to distort streetlights into blurry streaks across the glass. For most of the drive, neither of them spoke. Rebecca gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned pale while thoughts spiraled uncontrollably through her exhausted mind. Eviction. Debt. Daniel threatening to leave. Marcus demanding custody. Tyler sitting silently beside her, absorbing all the emotional collapse happening around him. Then her phone rang again through the car speakers. Daniel. Rebecca answered instinctively before immediately regretting it once the argument restarted. Tyler sat frozen beside her, listening while Daniel demanded she stop, throwing her entire future away. Rebecca finally snapped emotionally somewhere during that conversation. "I can't keep ruining my life for everyone else," she shouted through tears before hanging up abruptly. The silence afterward inside the car felt devastating. Rebecca realized instantly Tyler heard every word. When she looked toward him, his face had completely changed. Not angry, heartbroken, like something inside him finally collapsed. "You mean me?" he whispered softly. Rebecca immediately tried explaining, but Tyler suddenly opened the passenger door the moment the car slowed near Blackwater Bridge and ran directly into the storm before she could stop him. Everything after that survived inside Rebecca's memory in broken fragments more than complete sequences. Rain pouring so hard it hurt her eyes. Tyler running toward the bridge railing, crying uncontrollably while she screamed his name through the storm. Headlights approaching from another vehicle somewhere behind them. Rebecca slipping across wet pavement while reaching desperately for Tyler's arm near the guardrail. For one brief second, she actually caught him. She remembered that detail clearly even years later. Her hand around his wrist. Tyler looking directly at her with tears mixed into rainwater across his face. Then another flash of headlights blinded everything. A horn sounded nearby. Tyler pulled backward suddenly. Rebecca lost her footing, and within seconds the space beside the railing stood empty. The silence afterward felt impossible. No splash, no scream, just rain and darkness beneath the bridge stretching endlessly downward toward river water almost invisible below. Police later concluded Tyler Bennett accidentally fell into the river during the storm after running from Rebecca, emotionally distressed. Search teams spent days dragging the water beneath Blackwater Bridge while helicopters scanned nearby woods and abandoned buildings. But they never recovered a body. No clothing. No confirmed sightings. Nothing except Tyler's abandoned bicycle discovered near the bridge days later and Rebecca Lawson collapsing publicly during emotional news interviews begging for the child to come home safely. Most people sympathized with her initially because grief looked genuine. Exhaustion looked genuine. Rebecca spent weeks barely functioning while police questioned her repeatedly about the timeline leading toward the disappearance. Yet beneath all the sympathy, suspicion quietly survived because details surrounding that night never fully aligned. Especially after investigators uncovered damaged surveillance footage from traffic cameras near the bridge showing something deeply unsettling. Rebecca Lawson appeared leaving Blackwater Bridge alone during the storm. No Tyler visible anywhere beside her. Tyler Bennett's disappearance transformed from a local tragedy into a national obsession faster than anyone expected. Within days of the search beginning, major news networks arrived in St. Louis, broadcasting live beside Blackwater Bridge, while helicopters circled overhead, searching the riverbanks continuously. Missing child cases already carried enormous emotional weight across America during the late 2000s. But something about Rebecca Lawson's story gripped people immediately. Maybe it was the haunting image of Tyler's abandoned bicycle beside the bridge. Maybe it was Rebecca herself collapsing during emotional interviews while begging the public for help. Or maybe it was the uncomfortable uncertainty surrounding what actually happened during those final moments in the storm. Because unlike most disappearances, this case carried no clear answers. No body, no confirmed witnesses, no physical evidence proving Tyler drowned. Just fragments, conflicting timelines, damaged surveillance footage, and one emotionally exhausted woman standing at the center of a mystery capable of destroying multiple lives permanently. The media quickly divided Rebecca into competing narratives depending on which channel audiences watched. Some portrayed her as a grieving guardian devastated by a tragic accident she could not stop. Others subtly framed her as emotionally unstable and potentially dangerous long before police officially considered her a suspect publicly. As the investigation deepened, public opinion surrounding Rebecca Lawson became increasingly vicious. Television analysts dissected her interviews frame by frame, searching for inconsistencies in body language and emotional reactions. One network aired slowed footage of Rebecca crying during a press conference beside Tyler's photograph, while commentators debated whether her grief looked performative. Online forums exploded with theories almost immediately. Thousands of strangers who never met Rebecca or Tyler suddenly felt convinced they understood exactly what happened that night. She pushed him. She abandoned him after he threatened suicide. It was an accident, and people just want someone to blame. The boy survived, and somebody helped him disappear. Every theory gained traction somewhere, because the emotional ambiguity surrounding the case invited projection from everyone watching. Rebecca stopped reading comments after strangers started sending graphic messages accusing her of murdering Tyler intentionally to escape financial burdens. But avoiding the internet became impossible eventually because the case followed her everywhere. Grocery stores, work meetings, parent conferences at her daughter's school. People recognized her face constantly from television coverage and reacted either with sympathy or suspicion, depending on which version of the story they believed personally. The investigation itself only became more confusing as new possibilities emerged. Police initially focused heavily on Marcus Bennett because his criminal history and addiction issues made him an obvious suspect publicly. Detectives explored whether Marcus might have abducted Tyler during the storm after losing custody temporarily. But despite months of searching, investigators never uncovered evidence placing him near Blackwater Bridge that night. Then attention shifted toward Daniel Pierce after rumors surfaced about escalating arguments between him and Rebecca concerning Tyler's presence in their lives. Former co-workers described Daniel as controlling and emotionally manipulative beneath his polished appearance, leading internet communities to speculate he pressured Rebecca into getting rid of Tyler somehow. More extreme theories spread across conspiracy forums, claiming Tyler became victim to human trafficking networks operating near interstate corridors outside St. Louis. One anonymous blogger even accused detectives of covering up evidence intentionally after discovering a local officer once worked private security for Daniel Pierce's business associates years earlier. None of the theories fully explained the missing child, yet each introduced enough uncertainty to keep the case alive in public consciousness far longer than investigators expected. Meanwhile, Rebecca Lawson's private life deteriorated quietly beneath the constant pressure of suspicion and unresolved grief. The version of Rebecca people saw publicly during interviews barely resembled the woman unraveling behind closed doors afterward. She stopped sleeping almost entirely within months of Tyler's disappearance because every attempt at rest triggered nightmares about the bridge. Rain against windows became unbearable. Thunderstorms sent her into panic attacks strong enough. She sometimes locked herself inside bathrooms, shaking uncontrollably until they passed. Alcohol slowly replaced sleep as the only thing temporarily muting memories from that night. At first, Rebecca drank quietly after interviews ended or after police interrogations left her emotionally hollow. Eventually, bottles started appearing hidden throughout the house because functioning sober became harder every year the case remained unresolved. Some nights, she swore she heard Tyler's voice calling from hallways while the house sat completely empty. Once, during a grocery store trip nearly 4 years after the disappearance, Rebecca chased a young man across an entire parking lot because she became convinced for several terrifying seconds he looked exactly like Tyler at 16 years old. Trauma reshaped every corner of her life until paranoia and guilt became impossible to separate from ordinary reality anymore. Present-day Rebecca looked successful from the outside, but emotionally, she never escaped Blackwater Bridge. Even after marrying Andrew and rebuilding her finances through relentless work, the unresolved disappearance followed her silently through every achievement. She avoided discussing Tyler publicly whenever possible because interviews always reopened questions nobody could answer cleanly. Yet deep down, Rebecca carried something more painful than public suspicion alone. She carried uncertainty about her own memories. During therapy sessions years earlier, she admitted the storm itself blurred parts of the night into fragments difficult to organize chronologically afterward. Did Tyler pull away intentionally after she grabbed him? Did another vehicle stop near the bridge? Why couldn't she clearly remember the exact moment he disappeared from sight? Investigators interpreted those memory gaps differently depending on their opinions about her innocence. Some believed trauma naturally distorted recollection during extreme emotional stress. Others suspected Rebecca suppressed details subconsciously because she could not face what truly happened. Rebecca herself no longer knew which explanation frightened her more. Then came the discovery that changed the entire case again nearly 18 years later. After weeks of anonymous messages and leaked evidence, Rebecca received another encrypted file late one evening while sitting alone in her office reviewing old police records. At first, the footage looked similar to the grainy surveillance clip already circulating online. Blackwater Bridge during heavy rain. Headlights reflecting across wet pavement. Rebecca and Tyler arguing near the railing. But then the camera angle shifted suddenly. Rebecca froze instantly because this perspective came from somewhere entirely different than official traffic cameras. Someone filmed the bridge from another location that night. A higher angle overlooking portions of the roadway investigators never released publicly. Rebecca watched in horror as the footage continued several seconds beyond where the known surveillance ended. Another vehicle appeared parked farther down the bridge, partially hidden in darkness. Someone stood beside it watching everything unfold. The video stopped before revealing the person clearly, but one realization became impossible to ignore afterward. Tyler Bennett and Rebecca Lawson were not alone on Blackwater Bridge the night he disappeared. Someone else witnessed what happened, and whoever sent those messages had spent 18 years hiding that truth. Rebecca Lawson spent nearly 3 weeks tracing the anonymous messages before the trail finally led somewhere real. Most of the accounts used to send files disappeared within hours. Phone numbers deactivated immediately after contact. Encrypted emails bounced through servers across multiple states, making digital tracking almost impossible. But one detail kept repeating quietly beneath everything. Every file connected somehow to the old Riverside construction project located less than half a mile from Blackwater Bridge back in 2008. At first, Rebecca assumed it was coincidence because dozens of workers rotated through the area during the bridge repairs that summer. But after comparing archived employment records against timestamps hidden inside the leaked surveillance footage, one name surfaced repeatedly: Leonard Hayes, a retired overnight security guard now living alone outside Springfield, nearly 4 hours away from the city. Rebecca drove there immediately after discovering the connection because by then exhaustion and obsession completely overpowered fear. She needed answers more than she needed emotional protection anymore. And deep down, part of her already suspected whoever watched the bridge that night knew the truth she spent 18 years trying unsuccessfully to forget. Leonard Hayes looked older than Rebecca expected when he finally opened the trailer door after several minutes of silence. Mid-70s, thin gray hair, deep exhaustion carved permanently into his face. The moment he saw Rebecca standing outside, his expression changed in a way that confirmed everything before either of them spoke. Not surprise, recognition, guilt. For several long seconds, neither person moved because both understood the emotional weight carried into that moment. Leonard finally stepped aside quietly, allowing Rebecca inside without resistance. Old surveillance monitors and dusty VHS equipment still filled portions of the trailer, as though Leonard never fully escaped the security job that connected him to Blackwater Bridge years earlier. Rebecca immediately demanded to know why he spent nearly 2 decades hiding evidence instead of going directly to police. Leonard stared silently toward the floor before answering with a sentence that made Rebecca's stomach tighten instantly. "Because I kept telling myself you'd already suffered enough." That was the first moment Rebecca truly understood Leonard Hayes was not blackmailing her. He was forcing her to confront something he believed she spent years running from emotionally. Then Leonard finally revealed what actually happened the night Tyler Bennett disappeared. During the storm in 2008, Leonard worked overnight security monitoring equipment at the nearby construction site overlooking portions of Blackwater Bridge. Heavy rain disrupted most camera feeds that evening, but Leonard still noticed Rebecca's car stopping near the guardrail close to midnight. At first, he assumed it was another stranded driver waiting for weather conditions to improve. Then he saw Tyler run from the passenger's side, crying while Rebecca chased after him through the storm. Leonard watched the argument unfold through partial camera angles and binoculars from the construction trailer because thunder and distance made hearing impossible. But certain moments stayed burned permanently into his memory afterward. Tyler screaming something emotional near the railing, Rebecca reaching desperately toward him, and then the horrifying realization that Tyler was not trying to escape Rebecca physically. He was trying to escape emotionally. After hearing Rebecca say she could not keep ruining her life for everyone else, Tyler believed he truly destroyed the people he loved simply by existing. According to Leonard, Tyler climbed over the bridge railing intentionally. Not recklessly, deliberately. The little boy stood trembling above the river while Rebecca screamed for him to come back down through rain and headlights flashing across wet pavement. Then came the moment Rebecca spent 18 years reliving incompletely inside nightmares. Tyler looked directly at her before slipping one hand free from the railing. Rebecca lunged forward instinctively and almost reached him again. Almost. But for several devastating seconds, she froze completely. Leonard described it carefully because he knew cruelty no longer served any purpose. Rebecca did not freeze because she wanted Tyler dead. She froze because panic overwhelmed her nervous system faster than action. Fear, shock, exhaustion, emotional collapse. Human beings sometimes hesitate during catastrophic moments without understanding why until afterward destroys them for it. Those few seconds changed everything. Tyler lost his grip entirely and disappeared into darkness beneath the bridge before Rebecca finally reached the railing, screaming hysterically into the storm below. Rebecca collapsed emotionally, hearing the full truth spoken aloud for the first time, because Leonard's version aligned perfectly with the fragmented guilt she carried privately since 2008. She never pushed Tyler. She never wanted him harmed. But deep down, she always suspected her hesitation mattered more than anyone realized publicly. Leonard sat quietly while Rebecca cried uncontrollably across the small trailer because he understood something investigators and internet strangers never fully grasped about that night. The tragedy did not come from evil. It came from emotional exhaustion colliding with a frightened child who believed he was unwanted. After several minutes, Leonard finally spoke the sentence Rebecca feared hearing for nearly 2 decades. "You didn't kill him," he said softly, "but you were the last person who could have saved him." Those words shattered whatever emotional defenses Rebecca still carried, because they confirmed the exact truth she spent years unable to articulate herself. Guilt became unbearable precisely because it existed inside moral ambiguity instead of clear innocence or deliberate cruelty. Then Leonard revealed something even more shocking. Tyler Bennett never died beneath Blackwater Bridge. After falling into the river, the boy survived long enough to become trapped downstream near construction barriers Leonard's crew installed weeks earlier. Leonard found him nearly unconscious while searching riverbanks before emergency responders fully organized rescue operations. Tyler suffered injuries, hypothermia, and emotional trauma severe enough he barely spoke coherently afterward. But he was alive. Rebecca stared at Leonard, unable to process the words because every version of her life since 2008 centered around Tyler's disappearance ending in death. Leonard explained he intended contacting authorities immediately until Tyler begged him not to. According to Leonard, Tyler believed Rebecca genuinely wished he was gone after hearing her words inside the car. He became convinced returning home would only continue destroying the people around him emotionally and financially. Leonard tried reassuring him repeatedly, but Tyler refused completely. Eventually, Leonard made a decision he still questioned years later. Instead of notifying police, he helped Tyler disappear temporarily through relatives living outside Missouri while intending to revisit the situation later once emotions calmed. But temporary became permanent once the national media obsession exploded around Rebecca Lawson publicly. The most devastating part came at the very end of Leonard's confession. Tyler Bennett watched Rebecca's life from a distance for years afterward. Leonard admitted Tyler followed news coverage obsessively while growing older under a different identity far from Missouri. He saw Rebecca crying during interviews, saw the accusations destroying her publicly, saw her eventually rebuild a new life with Andrew while still carrying obvious guilt everywhere she went emotionally. But Tyler never contacted her because he believed Rebecca deserved freedom from the burden he represented. Hearing that broke something inside Rebecca permanently, because for the first time she understood the true tragedy of Blackwater Bridge. Tyler did not disappear because he stopped loving her. He disappeared because he loved her enough to believe leaving forever might save her future. After leaving Leonard Hayes' trailer that night, Rebecca Lawson drove for nearly 3 hours without turning on the radio once. The roads blurred endlessly beneath headlights while one realization repeated through her mind louder than every accusation she survived over the past 18 years. Tyler Bennett had been alive the entire time. Somewhere out there, the little boy she believed drowned beneath Blackwater Bridge grew into a man carrying emotional scars she helped create during one terrible moment of exhaustion and fear. Rebecca expected relief after learning he survived. Instead, the truth felt heavier than grief itself because death would have frozen Tyler permanently at 8 years old inside her memory. Survival meant he spent 18 years living with consequences from that night too. Alone, watching her from a distance. believing she wanted freedom from him. That thought destroyed Rebecca more completely than any public suspicion ever could, because she finally understood the emotional tragedy hidden beneath the disappearance. Tyler did not vanish because he hated her. He vanished because he believed leaving permanently was the only way to stop ruining her life. For several days after meeting Leonard, Rebecca barely spoke to anyone. Andrew watched helplessly while she wandered the house at night, replaying old news footage and reading Tyler's childhood school records she kept hidden inside storage boxes for nearly 2 decades. Every memory now carried a different emotional weight. Tyler waiting beside windows for her to come home from work. Tyler apologizing constantly for small mistakes. Tyler asking quietly whether things would be easier if he was not there. Rebecca realized the signs of emotional damage existed everywhere long before Blackwater Bridge. But survival pressure blinded her to how deeply the child internalized every frustrated conversation and exhausted expression around him. That realization forced Rebecca into confronting a truth even harder than public blame. She spent years viewing herself only as either victim or suspect in Tyler's disappearance. In reality, she was something far more human and uncomfortable. A deeply overwhelmed person whose emotional collapse accidentally convinced a vulnerable child he was unwanted. The tragedy came not from cruelty alone, but from ordinary exhaustion left unchecked until it changed lives permanently. Then, exactly 6 days after Rebecca met Leonard Hayes, another message arrived on her phone just after midnight. No threats this time. No surveillance footage. Only an address outside Denver and a sentence beneath it. If you still want the truth, come alone. Rebecca drove there immediately despite Andrew begging her not to leave until morning. The address led to a quiet lakeside diner, closed for the night, except for a single light glowing near the back patio overlooking dark water beyond the parking lot. At first, Rebecca saw nobody. Then a man slowly stepped forward from the shadows wearing a gray jacket with rain collecting across the shoulders. Rebecca froze before he even spoke because some part of her recognized him instantly despite 18 years passing between them. The eyes, the posture, the nervous way he held his hands while avoiding direct eye contact. Tyler Bennett stood only a few feet away, alive at 26 years old, while Rebecca struggled to breathe properly for the first time since Blackwater Bridge. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Rebecca expected anger, accusations, hatred powerful enough to match the guilt she carried for nearly 2 decades. Instead, Tyler looked emotionally exhausted more than furious, like someone carrying sadness so long it became part of his identity permanently. Rebecca finally broke the silence first. "I thought you were dead," she whispered before tears immediately overwhelmed her voice. Tyler nodded slowly without looking away. "Sometimes I think part of me was," he answered quietly. That sentence shattered whatever emotional control Rebecca still possessed, because suddenly Tyler was no longer the missing child from television reports or the haunting memory destroying her sleep every night. He was simply a man forced to build an entire life around one terrible misunderstanding that neither of them fully escaped emotionally. Rebecca apologized repeatedly through tears while trying unsuccessfully to explain the exhaustion, fear, and panic consuming her during that period. Tyler listened silently until she finally stopped talking altogether. Then Tyler revealed the truth Rebecca never considered during all those years, blaming herself. After Leonard rescued him downstream, Tyler watched the investigation unfold secretly while recovering with distant relatives outside Missouri. At first, he planned returning home once things calmed down emotionally. But every news report changed his mind further. He saw Rebecca being torn apart publicly by strangers accusing her of murder. He saw Daniel Pierce leaving shortly after the investigation intensified. He saw her daughter bullied at school because of media coverage. Most devastating of all, Tyler saw Rebecca blaming herself constantly during interviews, even before police started treating her suspiciously. "I thought if I came back," Tyler admitted quietly, "it would destroy whatever was left of your life." Rebecca stared at him speechless because even after everything, Tyler still carried the same heartbreaking instinct that defined him as a child, protecting other people from pain even when it destroyed him emotionally in the process. Rebecca finally asked the question haunting her since Leonard's confession. "Why contact me now?" Tyler looked toward the lake silently for several seconds before answering. "Because I needed you to know what your words did to me." The honesty behind that sentence hit harder than anger ever could. Tyler explained he spent years in therapy trying to untangle how deeply one moment near Blackwater Bridge reshaped his understanding of love, worth, and belonging. Hearing Rebecca say she could not keep ruining her life for everyone else convinced him permanently that he was a burden people suffered through rather than someone genuinely wanted. "I know you didn't mean it the way I heard it," Tyler said softly. "But kids remember pain differently." Rebecca completely broke down crying after that, because no apology could erase the emotional damage created during those seconds in the storm. Some wounds survive long after intentions stop matching. Then came the final moment Rebecca Lawson would carry for the rest of her life. Through tears, she begged Tyler for forgiveness, while admitting she never forgave herself for hesitating at the railing that night. Tyler stepped closer for the first time since arriving and quietly answered with words that changed everything between them. "I forgave you years ago," he said. "I just don't think you ever forgave yourself." Silence followed. Not empty silence. The kind filled with grief, relief, regret, and emotional truth finally spoken aloud after 18 years of hiding beneath guilt and fear. Tyler eventually walked away from the diner before sunrise without promising future visits or emotional reunions like movies often portray. Some damage cannot be repaired neatly. Some relationships survive only as fragile understanding between people forever changed by the same moment. Rebecca watched him disappear into darkness, feeling both devastated and strangely lighter at the same time, because for the first time since Blackwater Bridge, uncertainty no longer controlled her life completely. And maybe that is what makes stories like this so unsettling. The decision that changed everything lasted only a few seconds. No evil mastermind. No calculated murder. Just emotional exhaustion colliding with a frightened child who believed he was unwanted. Sometimes lives are not destroyed by hatred alone. Sometimes they unravel because ordinary people fail each other during moments that cannot be taken back once they pass. The story of Rebecca Lawson and Tyler Bennett stayed with people long after the case finally disappeared from headlines again, because it forced millions of viewers to confront something deeply uncomfortable about human nature. Most people want tragedy to come from obvious evil because that makes guilt easier to identify and blame easier to assign. But this story refused to fit neatly into categories like monster and victim. Rebecca Lawson did not wake up wanting to destroy a child's life. She was emotionally exhausted, financially drowning, overwhelmed by pressure, and slowly collapsing beneath responsibilities she no longer knew how to carry. Tyler Bennett was not weak or dramatic. He was an emotionally sensitive little boy who spent too long believing his existence created pain for the people around him. Their lives collided during one terrible storm where fear, exhaustion, misunderstanding, and hesitation changed everything in ways neither of them fully recovered from afterward. And maybe that is what makes this story feel so personal to people watching. Because deep down, almost everyone can remember a moment where words spoken during frustration hurt someone more deeply than intended. What makes the emotional weight even harder to escape is knowing Tyler carried Rebecca's sentence with him for 18 years. One moment inside a car. One exhausted statement said during emotional collapse. "I can't keep ruining my life for everyone else." Rebecca meant debt, stress, Marcus Bennett. Foreclosure. Pressure. But Tyler heard something completely different. Children often interpret pain personally because they lack the emotional tools adults use to separate frustration from rejection. That misunderstanding followed him into adulthood, while Rebecca spent the same years believing hesitation at the bridge killed him permanently. Two people emotionally destroyed by the same moment, while each blamed themselves for opposite reasons. And perhaps the most haunting part of all is realizing how ordinary the situation looked before it turned catastrophic. No dramatic warning signs. No obvious evil plan. Just exhaustion left untreated long enough to damage everyone nearby emotionally. That is why so many people related to this story after it spread online again years later. Because families everywhere carry moments they wish they could take back. Sentences spoken in anger. Silence during emotional crises. Hesitation when someone needed reassurance most. So now the question becomes impossible to avoid. Do you believe Rebecca Lawson was responsible for what happened to Tyler Bennett? Was she simply a victim of overwhelming pressure who made one tragic mistake during emotional collapse? Or do moments of hesitation still carry responsibility even when harm was never intended? Let us know what you think in the comments below because stories like this rarely leave people emotionally unchanged. Can words really shape someone's life forever? And if you were standing beside that bridge during the storm after hearing Tyler ask whether things would be easier without him, would you have blamed yourself afterward too? Sometimes the decisions that change lives forever are not the dramatic choices people expect. Sometimes they are only a few words spoken during the worst night of someone's life. And if you thought this decision destroyed lives, wait until you hear the next story. So subscribe and turn on notifications because the next truth might stay with you long after the screen fades to black.